So the first video I posted on subjunctives are your forms, and so I recommend, if you don't know your Latin subjunctive forms, I recommend going to look at that video and checking that out, especially the present. We're going to be using the present subjunctive a lot today. The imperfect a little bit, but also the present for sure is where you're going to use most of your independent subjunctives. That is because these are a lot of like orders and wishes and urges and stuff like that, and you'll find that you can't. It's hard to do things in the past that you can't like urge somebody to have done something. Hopefully, you can't. You can't order that somebody has already done something if they didn't know your order. So a lot of these are going to be in the present subjunctive, things that you want people to do right now or you hope are going to happen in the future. But you'll note the subjunctives are used for not statements but either wishes or things that might happen. Just the uncertainty, I guess, surrounds the subjunctive in translation. So, and a lot of you have asked questions about how to translate the subjunctive as we've been doing the forms, and that's a very good question. But I keep answering it. It all depends on context, and so I'm going to give you some contexts today. This is by no means all of them, but this is how the subjunctive is used when it's not in a separate clause. Subjunctives mostly like make up special clauses in Latin. That's where you'll see probably 90% of them. But that last chunk, they are used in independent senses. Independent meaning that they're not in like an ut clause or a cum clause. And so we have to know how to use those in those kinds of contexts to kind of hammer down what the subjunctive is doing. And so I'm going to start. I'm just going to separate, give you 4 different uses of the subjunctive, and you'll note that the subjunctive is a mood, so you're gonna have a different tone to each one, and that's kind of your first foray into changing the mood of a verb. From just a factual statement to now like wishes and polite commands, stuff like that. So let's get started here. The first one is hortatory, the hortatory subjunctive. And you'll remember, of course, your verb hortor, hortari, hortatus. The deponent means to urge. So this is going to be an urging verb. All right, so hortor, to urge. And the thing about this one is it's going to include yourself. And when you urge people and you want to include yourself, you say let us. Like, so that's going to be the key here is in the translation. It's like, let us do this. You'll note again, the subjunctive is one of those ones that doesn't have a lot of factual statements. It's not saying we are doing this. It's saying that I'm encouraging us to go do these things. And so that's why the first person plural is used in the present tense, because it's an urge for right now happening. It's an urge that we can do right now, and it includes me. So it's going to be hortatory is always first plural. You're going to say like, well, if it's first plural, it's probably hortatory. That's going to be your big hint, and your translation is let us. So I'll give you a few examples here. Rewind if I go too fast. I'm sorry if I do. I'm trying to keep this video a little bit shorter. So we got vivamos me lesbia atque amemos. And so your 2 subjunctives here, vivamos and amemos, and sorry, vivamos if you want to use classical pronunciation. Those are your subjunctives, and you simply let us live, my lesbia, and let us love. One of the most famous hortatory subjunctives right there in Catullus, Catullus 5. So, let us live, my lesbia, and let us love. You notice it is not saying like we are living, lesbia, and we are loving. That'd be awkward. It'd be weird. It's not poetic. The tone is way different. He's trying to urge some kind of Epicurean lifestyle. And so he starts off with the let us live and let us love. And I think that's that mood is very key there. So anyway, that's kind of your first one that I always think of. That one I think of the hortatory. That's the first example. Very famous song that comes out of the Middle Ages, maybe the later Middle Ages even. Gaudeamus igitur juvenestum sumus. So the gaudeamus there, gaudeamus igitur, let us rejoice thus while we are young. Juvenestum sumus. You notice the indicative in the second line. We are indeed young. Like this is kind of like a more factual thing. But where the urge is to let us rejoice, let us be happy, right? While we are young, let us smile. Doesn't mean to smile, but it means rejoice. That's another very good example. And finally, if you go to a Latin mass, you'll hear the priest go "Oremus." It means "Let us pray." And so that's another example. Notice your first conjugation verb there with the oro orare. And so your e is your subjunctive there. But anyway, that's the hortatory. This is probably one of the more common independent subjunctive ones. This one and the next one you'll see probably the most of all of these if you combine those two. So we'll move on to that one. The second one is the jussive subjunctive. The jussive gets its name from the verb eubeo in Latin, and hopefully you know that verb from second quarter when we do indirect statements. But you'll remember the last principal part is, of course, iusus. And so that ius right there is where you get your word jussive, and it means to order. And the jussive subjunctive is a polite command. I usually say let this happen, but you can also say like you should if you have a second person. That's the other note there. If you have a second person, you can use the you should. The third person I like to use let. All right. You'll notice this is kind of a Marie Antoinette one, like let them eat cake. Since she didn't say it in Latin, I didn't put it on here. But like I always think of that as kind of the mood. Like you should eat cake. That's what you should do. So anyway, let's move on to some examples here. Quis amad valeat. Whoever loves, let him thrive. Notice the let there versus the amat, which is just the indicative. I like to find quotes that have the contrast between the indicative and the subjunctive. So whoever is loving, whoever loves, that's just indicative. Let him thrive, valeat. And then we have a kind of a chiasmatic structure here, where we have like in this one the first thing is the indicative, then the subjunctive, and here we have the subjunctive and then the indicative, and so you get that nice chiasma structure. Anyway, let's just kind of get rid of all that. Okay, so whoever loves, let him thrive, and this means let him die, he who does not know to love. Kind of not know how to love, or that he should be loving, or take that for however you will. But it's not a literal thing, but it's one of those ideas that people who are creating happiness, who are generating happiness, like we hope that they thrive, and people who are kind of like Scrooges. We don't want them to die, but this is kind of an extreme quote saying like let them perish. So it's just kind of an idea that you don't really want to be around them. But anyway, it's kind of a nice contrast between the indicative and the subjunctive there. Populus volt. Oh, that should be volt. My autocorrect has failed me here. There we go. Populus volt decipiatur. A people wants to be deceived. Ooh, let them be deceived. I kind of like that again. You get the indicative with the infinitive there on this side, all indicative, and then here we have the subjunctive. So the people want to be deceived, let them be deceived. Notice this is a statement. The first half is this whole like the people want to be deceived. That's a statement, and then this here is kind of like okay, let them be deceived. Like let them go ahead. So there you go. Justitia fiat, ruat caelum, another chiasmatic one. These little quotes have a lot of this little like, here's a noun, here's the verb, and then here's the verb, here's the noun. So it's like backwards word order in the second half. Anyway, justitia fiat, ruat caelum. Let justice happen, and let the sky fall, let it be destroyed. Not really let it be destroyed. Let the sky fall. Anyway, that's a nice let there. I didn't do any second person. I'm sorry for the examples. You can definitely get second person in there too with the you should. But anyway, we're going to move on. And the third one, the optative. Optative comes from the Latin verb optare, which means to want. Optare means to want. This is the wishing subjunctive use. It could be any person. You can wish that anything happened. You can wish that something happened to you. So you wish that I do something, or you can wish that that something over there happens in the third person. I can wish that you do something. So there it is. It could be any person. It's usually done with some passion. So you might see exclamation points. You might not. Actually, the last one, I've seen many publishers put an exclamation point there, so I'm going to insert one there. It's sometimes paired with utinam. When you see utinam, you're almost like, that's an optative subjunctive. That's like one of those words where you're like, aha, that's giving it away right there. It doesn't need one though. It's very important to note that you don't need an utinam. I gave you an example with and without, so hopefully that helps. Utinam it doesn't really translate in on its own. It's just kind of like a hint word. And so I'll go through this first example. Utinam id sit quod spero. It's like let it be that which I wish. In other words, let the thing which I hope happen. Like let it exist. Maybe it's like an action I want to happen, like, I hope that it happens. The sit there is your subjunctive, your sparrow is your indicative, I hope. But the sit is your subjunctive of to be, so, oh, would that it happen, it which I hope. So, yeah, that's a nice little quote there. And then one from Catullus, of course, Catullus 2, or Catullus 3. Ooh, I don't remember. It's the sparrow one. I think it's Catullus 2. Yes, Catullus 2. And so, tecum ludere sicudipsa possem tristis animi levare curas. And so here the subjunctive is actually not in the present tense. I told you it was mostly going to be in the present tense, but here we have an imperfect subjunctive right there, possum. And you can kind of translate it right in the present tense, though, because it's still a wish. May I be able to play with you as she herself does, and may be able to lighten the cares of my sad heart. And so it's a very interesting one. He's talking about a bird. A little bird that a little pet bird. It makes people happy. But anyway, you can notice the mood there. You can use like the oh would that translation in this one. Oh would that. If you like your old-fashioned translations, oh would that this happen, it which I hope. Oh would that I be able to play with you as she herself does, and to lighten the cares of my sad heart. The oh would that is a good translation. I also like just like may it happen. So the may is kind of a wishful kind of word. So those are your two translations of the optative. But it's just a wish. It's a wish that something happens. If you were wishing with genies in Latin, you would use the optative subjunctive. And finally, the deliberative. The deliberative is an odd one, but it's very easy to spot because it's a question. It's going to be a question word. It can be in any person, and you can usually just use should. And so those three all hold true here. So really, I always look for the questions on the deliberative. If I see a subjunctive in a question, I'm like, that's deliberative. So I give you kind of an easy example. What should I do? Quid faciam. Notice the am, the first person singular. What should I do? Maneam out abeam. There's a quote. It's actually on instead of out, but I know that we know out better than on, so I used out. But essentially, it's just should I stay or should I go? There's a nice song about that too, as well. But notice all these little subjunctives here. The ams, kind of giving away the subjunctive, and then since they're in questions, you say should. And you note the should is it very lines up definitely with the mood. it's not saying like am I going or what am I doing. It's like what should I do. There's like kind of a gray area whether or not it will happen, or it whether or not it even like is allowed to happen, or if it's the right thing to do. So there's a lot more question marks with the subjunctive, isn't there? There's a lot more uncertainty in the speaker when they use the subjunctive, and so yeah, that's the difference in the mood there between quid facio, what am I doing, and quid faciam, what should I do. And so, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I hope this video was helpful. I tried to keep it brief per subjunctive use, and hopefully I gave you the clues that you need and you took notes. If you didn't take notes, go back and take a couple notes on the video and do some practice sentences on Schoology. And I will hopefully see you either online if you're in one of the coronavirus classes, or if you're a class that we have in successive years, I'll see you in class or after school or whatever.